tonight on the CW. We're joined by Sam Bradshaw, the Rain Man of SicEm365.com, who we showed the graphic that, Sam, you had sent us in a direct message, and you're able to join us just now. And leave that up on the screen, Garrett, if you can. So, Sam, we have the graphic from 2010 until now. The Big 12 on the left side, which I think you said that's Baylor's earnings, but everybody in the Big 12 on the left. Colorado and what they've earned in the Pac-12 on the right. And then, of course, the delta of how much difference there is, including $15 million just 3 years ago. What made you get into this?
Thanks for having me on. And two things kind of brought this on. One, I saw somebody do just a smaller snippet of the years there, just as a bit of a breakdown. And then from there, got to the question of what is the grand sum total since they decided to leave, including the exit fee. And then beyond that, there's just this constant question of why is it taking so long for them to make a decision to either stay or go? You know, are they going to sign a grant of rights? Are they going to decide to leave? Why is it taking long? Well, a large portion of why it's probably taking so long is they've lost close to $70 million because they were very hasty in terms of leaving. And at the time, I understand it looked like 6 teams were leaving the Big 12 with 5 coming with them. But, you know, in hindsight, it's been a bit of a snafu for them, where conservatively it's $67 million plus whatever they'd sell their Tier 3 television rights for. And it's definitely been a money loser for them. And I can completely understand them wanting to have hard numbers from the Pac-12 before they make a move.
Sam, would this, I mean, again, we haven't heard anything that would be definitive on anything either way, but this does lead to like the theory that Colorado would be one of the first ones to go because they can compare their numbers previous and current and all that better than maybe anybody else in the league because they were in the Big 12 and this has not worked out for them and any metric, and financials the most important one to college athletics these days.
Well, I don't know if it necessarily hints at anything necessarily impending for them versus somebody else, but I do think it stands to reason that they can look at schools that they were peers with a decade ago and see that Texas Tech, they're getting 45% of the cumulative viewership over that time in my data for nationally rated networks because so many games are shoved onto Pac-12 network. You know, the exposure's down. They've lost money over this time period going to the Pac-12. You know, even if you say that, well, the Big 12 is splitting it 2 more ways, well, they're probably going to have a higher payout with Colorado in the fold than they would otherwise. And even then, $67 million is quite a deficit to chip away at with rationalizations like that. It's going to be pretty interesting to see how this plays out because if I'm Colorado, I want hard numbers because, you know, these are institutions. They've got people with a lot of different opinions, and there's probably a contingent at that university since they get so many of their students from the West Coast because they get a lot of things and a lot of those ties from the West Coast. There's probably a contingent that's reluctant to leave. And politically, it would probably play better if they could point to a number and say, see, this says we're going to make tens of millions more coming over this way versus staying. And that would give people who want to leave a lot more cover. If I'm George Kliavkoff and I, for some reason, don't have a good deal already, and we'll find out whether he does or not. But if I don't, I am kicking that can down the road as long as I can to make it as uncomfortable as possible on anybody who would push to leave.
Some of the responses, I'm going to read them, and you can respond, Sam, to your post on Twitter. This is really interesting. Is it on the main CU Form 990? Where do I find it? I have never interacted with that form before. Would love to take a look at the numbers myself.
Right. If you search for 990 forms for any of the major conferences, they're all registered as nonprofits, and that's the nonprofit tax form. Depending on which conference you're looking at, you can sometimes get it itemized out by this much is TV radio revenue, this much is TV contracts, this much is bowls. Some of them are itemized that way. Some of them are kind of lumped together in terms of revenue sources. But you also get an itemized breakdown for the vast majority of these of this school got X, this school got Y, this school got Z is the league distribution for that year, which is not just television revenue. That's bowls, that's March Madness, that's everything after expenses that they distributed out to the school.
Sarge wants to know, go back further than 2010. If I remember correctly, Colorado was losing major money prior to the move. That was part of the reason for the move.
Right. Two issues with going back further than 2010. The first issue is we're looking at Colorado's decision in 2010. So the relevance to that decision is pretty limited going back further than that. And then also with the television deals that they had prior to the contracts that kind of were started around the time that Colorado joined the Pac-12, that prior round of contracts were very, very similar per school. You're talking within $600K of just TV revenue. And considering that the Big 12 typically runs their overhead leaner than the Pac-12 has over the last decade or so, the difference is not going to be much to spit at. So, I mean, I could put the numbers up, but it's not really going to make a whole hill of beans difference.
Couple more things. Bender, I'm going to play devil's advocate. Let's say we are placing too much emphasis on sports. How much more did Colorado gain, if any? Academic funding, grants, did the money they lose from college sports outweigh what they gained from academics?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Okay. One of the responses or questions was, are we placing too much emphasis on sports? How much money did Colorado gain, if any, in academic funding and grants?
Well, in order to get that, you have to look at things in context. First off, did it go up? Did the overall nation as a whole get more grant money? And are those rises proportional to that? How much of that is attributable to the Pac-12? They were already, I saw one chart that showed their research increases were starting long before they even had any serious conversations about joining the Pac-12. So how much is directly attributed to that? It becomes very speculative and it becomes very difficult to parse out. That's one reason I haven't really touched that aspect of it, because it's very hard to quantify.
And then someone brought up, by the way, there's the $5 million that each of the schools in the Pac-12, including Colorado, owe Comcast, or at least it appears that way.
Right. And I'm not sure if that entirely was taken care of with the 22 to 23 distribution, but I know at least part of it was responsible for the reduction from $37 million to $36 million a school in the 2022 to 2023 distribution as opposed to the year before. Whether that covers all of it, I can't remember off the top of my head.
All right, so last question for you, Sam. You come up with these graphics and the images and the data and analytics. What has been, I've given you just some of the questions, and it's on your timeline, not mine, but what has been some of the reaction to this?
The biggest reaction is people are missing the point of why I put it out there. I put it out there as an indication of why is it taking so long? Well, they lost millions of dollars by moving fast last time. They're going to make sure they have as much of a concept of the numbers as they can before moving again, because they don't want to make another losing bet and end up well over $100 million short of what they could have been had they made their correct moves twice in a row. You don't want to be in a losing position on whatever move you make here. That's been the biggest takeaway, because everyone's like, oh, well, this is predicting something for the Big 12 versus Pac-12 going forward. No, I'm just pointing to the need for actual relevant numbers. And that's why this is going to drag out, because if they at all can have it, just simply to appease different constituents within their own group, even if they're leaning towards leaving, they're going to wait as long as they feasibly can in order to just not be leaping before they look. Right now it looks like the Big 12 is probably going to have a better deal than the Pac-12 if you believe most of the reporting out there. But then again, the reporting can quickly turn on a dime. Colorado, literally back in 2010, they announced on June 10th that they're leaving for the Pac-12. And then on June 14th, Chip Brown comes out and says the BB plan to save the Big 12 shows that they can make the requisite revenue, and they got assurances from TV partners that future contracts would be competitive with some of the top leagues. And all of a sudden, the desire for the remainder of the schools to immediately move kind of went up in smoke overnight. And they don't want to be on the losing end of that kind of turn again.
I just sent you a story, by the way, that we had mentioned earlier, this story on Yahoo Sports about ESPN and Comcast are at the table on negotiations perhaps involving Hulu as an option of money that might be coming available. Different options. It's an article by Matt Zemek, and I just sent that to you, direct message for you to look through and see if any of that makes sense to you.
Yeah, I'll definitely take a look.
When it comes to the Pac-12, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah. Just off the top of my head, the reluctance I'd have for that being a major deal for the Pac-12 over the short term is just the amount of time that putting an agreement together like that at the very top would take. Would potentially be longer than the timetable they need to get a deal done. But then again, this is the first I'm hearing of it, and I could potentially be very wrong on that. If I am, I'll own it.
No, I mean, we're looking at all the scenarios. That's what we've done. Just wanted you to know about it so you can digest it and spit it out one way or the other. Sam, thanks for your time and all your work. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. You guys have a great day.
Bradshaw on 365 Sports.